Welcome everyone, and my apologies for the delay, and I hope it's working now. Welcome to tonight's council meeting, and I'll now call upon Councillor Gillies to read the council prayer, please. Councillor Gillies.
Thank you, Mayor. Almighty God, we humbly seek your blessings upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and to the true welfare of the people of the city of Boroondara. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. I'll read the acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people as the traditional owners and original custodians of this land, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and elders who may be here from other communities today. The Local Government Act 2020 enables Council to hold virtual meetings with councillors participating remotely by electronic communication. The council meeting is being live streamed on the council website to enable public viewing of the proceedings, including councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting is also being recorded and will be made available on the council website soon after the meeting. Should technical problems be encountered, then the meeting will be adjourned until resolution. However, Council is not responsible for any technical difficulties that may be experienced by a member of the community in participating remotely in this meeting. And once the meeting commences, we are only able to provide rather limited assistance. I acknowledge the councillors present on the screen for tonight's meeting. There are also a number of officers in attendance tonight, and they'll be introduced as they present their reports. I'll now move to the order of business, which is listed in our business papers. So the first one is apologies. Are there any apologies, please, Ms. Manu?
Through you, Mayor, we've got an apology for Councillor Biggett this evening.
Thank you very much. So the next item is adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on 27 June 2022. Councillors, could I have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes? Councillor Gott and Councillor Thompson second. Can I just check if anyone's opposed? I can't see anyone opposed, so I'll declare that motion carried. Thank you, everyone. The next item is declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officers. So can I ask if anyone would like to declare a conflict of interest? Councillor Watson, I think you might be declaring one in general business about a leave of absence, a retrospective one. So when we get to that, we'll remind you. Thank you. The next item is deputations and presentations, petitions, public submissions. Can I check if there are any deputations, presentations? Mr. Wade?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there is one petition in relation to the bicycle strategy.
Thank you. And I believe that's been circulated in our business papers. So is anyone prepared to move a motion to receive and note the petition as has been printed in our business papers? Councillor Thompson? And do we have a seconder to Councillor Hollingsworth? Thank you. Can I check if anyone's opposed to that motion? No, I can't see any hands up. Thank you. So as there's no one opposed, I'll declare the motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Now, the next item is informal meetings of councillors. And again, we have a copy of that in our business papers. So is anyone prepared to move a motion to receive and note the record of informal meetings, as I said, that are printed in our business papers? Councillor Sinfield, seconded Councillor Gillies. Thank you. And is anyone opposed to that? Thank you. So I'll declare that motion carried. Thank you, councillors. So our next item is public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 on the day of the meeting. Questions that are submitted prior to 12 will be provided with a detailed verbal response as well as a written response. Those that are submitted after 12 will receive a verbal response if possible, but will otherwise be taken on notice for a written response to be provided in due course. Mr. Wee, do we have any public questions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this evening we have 6 questions with notice from 4 members of the community. There were no questions without notice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wee. So our first question is from Michael Daly. Thank you for the question, Mr. Daly. And it has been allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules because it's been put in writing to a councillor or member of council staff. And the question is, how much money has been budgeted for this proposed bike path through Macleay Myrtle Parks? And I'll call on Daniel Freer, the Director of Places and Spaces, if you wouldn't mind providing a response for Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. The path through Macleay and Myrtle Parks is an informal gravelled shared path, and the proposal involves inspecting, assessing and renewing the path where required as an unsealed gravel path. There is no specific funding allocated to these works, and it is part of Council's longer term initiatives and annual budget process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Freer. And Mr. Daly, you will receive a written response in due course. Our next question is also from Michael Daly, and again, the question's been allowed because it's been put in writing to a councillor or council officer more than 10 days before the meeting. And the question, how can you guarantee the safety of walkers, including those who are elderly or hearing impaired, who are going to use this shared bike path along its route through Borrandara Parks? And again, I'll ask Mr. Daniel Freer, Director of Places and Spaces, to respond to Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Council's role is to provide services and infrastructure for the benefit and wellbeing of the broader community. Amongst many wide-ranging responsibilities under the Victorian legislation, Council is also responsible for land use planning and development of local laws and enforcement in line with powers given to Council. In line with this, Council has developed and adopted an amenity local law which guides residents of their roles and responsibility and council officers in managing council managed land. The Victorian Road Safety Rules establishes rules and specify behaviour for all on-road and path users to support the safe and efficient use of roads and paths in Victoria. Council, however, is not empowered to enforce moving violations such as those involving cyclists riding fast on shared paths. This is the responsibility that rests with Victoria Police. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. And Mr. Daly, you'll also receive a written response in due course. Our next question is from Carol Hunt, and it relates to Balwyn Road signalised pedestrian crossing. And again, this question is being allowed because it has been put in writing to a councillor or council officer more than 10 days before this meeting. The question is, when is it proposed that the signalised pedestrian crossing in Balwyn Road, North Balwyn, to be funded by the Victorian Government, will be installed? And again, Mr. Freer, I believe you're going to answer that question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Installation of the pedestrian operated signals on Balwyn Road are expected in mid-2023. Approvals and processes are currently underway with the Department of Transport at the state level.
Thank you. And again, there'll be a written response coming out. Our next question is from Geraldine Hopper. It relates to numbers of walkers and cyclists in Hayes Paddock. Now, similarly, the question's been allowed because it was sent to a councillor or council officer more than 10 days ago. The question from Ms Hopper is, has the council done any assessment of the numbers of walkers and cyclists who are using Hayes Paddock each day? And if so, could you please make the information available? Again, Mr Freer, I believe you're able to answer that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council officers have arranged for surveys of path users in Hayes Paddock to be undertaken on Thursday, the 24th of March and Saturday, the 26th of March between the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. For the gravel path along the eastern side of the South Oval, a total of 517 pedestrians and 77 cyclists were recorded during the 12-hour period on the Thursday. Weekend volumes recorded on the Saturday were slightly higher, with 624 pedestrians and 93 cyclists over the 12-hour period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Freer. And again, Ms Hopper, you will receive a written response as well. Our next two questions come from Mr Ian Huntley, and both have been allowed because they've been put in writing to a councillor or council officer more than 10 days ago. The first one relates to the numbers of cyclists in Hayes Paddock, and the question is, please advise on the number of cyclists currently travelling in Hayes Paddock as identified by photographic imaging installed in Hayes Paddock and any other measures employed by Council for this purpose in 2022. And again, I'll ask Mr Freer, Director of Places and Spaces, to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and again through you. This is a very similar question to the last question, but I'll read the response similarly. Council officers have arranged for surveys of the path users in Hayes Paddock to be undertaken on Thursday the 24th of March and Saturday the 26th of March between the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. For the gravel path along the eastern side of the South Oval, a total of 517 pedestrians and 77 cyclists were recorded during the 12-hour period. Weekend volumes recorded on the Saturday were slightly higher, with 624 pedestrians and 93 cyclists over the 12-hour period. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Freer. And Mr Huntley, you will receive a written response. Now, your second question, which I said has been allowed, relates to acknowledgement of written representations in agenda papers. And the question is, please advise why it is that in the report of representations by identified community groups on the proposed bicycle strategy contained in the agenda paper for the Services Delegated Committee meeting of 11 July 2022, that written representations by the Lighter Footprints local government group in opposition to the cycleway through parks in East Kew Balwyn and North Balwyn were not acknowledged. And again, I'll ask Mr Freer to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Pages 15 and 27 of the Council report for the Services Delegated Committee meeting on the 11th of July 22 acknowledge correspondence received from Lighter Footprints dated the 5th of April 2022. Correspondence supporting the draft strategy has been received, co-signed by the Boroondara Bicycle User Groups, Lighter Footprints, Kooyong Climate Change Alliance and the ACF Boroondara Community Boroondara. This was the latest correspondence received from the group, which was included in the Council report, as the first one may have been superseded by the latter joint statement by Lighter Footprints. Council received a very high volume of submissions from a wide range of community members and groups and did not make reference to every individual submission received in the Council report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Free. And again, Mr. Huntley, you will receive a written report. So that's the end of our questions. Our next item is notices of motion. Mr. Weed, do we have any notices of motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have no notices of motion this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 7 is presentation of officer reports. And can I just check if anyone has an issue with the order or has a desire to flag an item that they feel doesn't need to be discussed and could be moved on block? I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll assume we just proceed with the agenda as written in our papers. So thank you, councillors. So the first item in the presentation of officer reports is the Borrandara Volunteer Resource Centre Strategic Service Plan 2022. And I believe that's going to be introduced by Fiona Brown, Manager Community Planning and Development. Thanks, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. The purpose of the report tonight is to present to Council the Borrandara Volunteer Resource Centre Strategic Service Plan 2022, which is attachment 1 in your agenda papers. The Borrandara Volunteer Resource Centre, or the BVRC, is Council's dedicated function for supporting volunteering in the community and provides tailored support to the local volunteer sector through a suite of free programs, services, community events and resources designed to encourage and facilitate volunteering. In 2021, the BVRC assisted over 2,400 prospective volunteers to find relevant and meaningful volunteer opportunities while providing volunteer management support to more than 320 local volunteer involving organisations and programs. The BVRC Strategic Service Plan has been refreshed to drive the direction for the next 4 years. It builds on the achievements of the 2016 plan, such as the development of a skilled volunteering program and the implementation of the nationally recognised online volunteer management system, Victorian, and outlines Council's continued commitment to respond to the needs of the local volunteer sector through targeted services, programs and events. The plan outlines how essential support will continue to be provided to local organisations, including council volunteer programs, which rely on the BVRC services to enhance their capacity to operate, deliver community health and wellbeing outcomes and increase opportunities for residents to participate in community life. The COVID-19 pandemic has presented many challenges for the local volunteer sector. The plan outlines the role the BVRC will play in the COVID-19 community recovery, providing support to community organisations in rebuilding volunteer workforces and reshaping volunteer opportunities to align with changing prospective volunteers' motivations and expectations of the volunteer experience. Councillor Hollingsworth has raised the availability of the 2021 census data. Once the relevant census data is released by the ABS, should any of the data make a difference to the actions proposed, we will update the plan. Once adopted, the BVRC Strategic Service Plan 2022 will be available on Council's website. So the officer's recommendation for tonight is that Council resolve to adopt the BVRC Strategic Service Plan 2022. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Now, councillors, are there any questions for Ms. Brown? Councillor Gillies, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not a question, but just to foreshadow a motion.
I'll note that. Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Are there any other questions that anyone has? It was a very straightforward and good report. Doesn't look like there are any others. So, Councillor Gillies, your motion.
It's the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. And Councillor Thompson, you're happy to second? Thank you. So for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to that motion? I can't see any hands up. So look, I'll hand back to you, Councillor Gillies, to speak to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to briefly thank the officers and all the staff at the BVRC. I would like to say that it's not complete happenstance that Boroondara has such a successful rate of volunteering. Whilst we all see community spirit manifests itself in a very wide range of activities, the nature of volunteering often means that the ebbs and the flows, the expectations, availability, and of course the remuneration are different to paid employment. So for a municipality to truly value and sustain its volunteering forces, it needs a strategic, dedicated, resourced support service. It needs an active, progressive approach, and it needs staff who understand contemporary volunteer management. We have that, and we have had it for 30 years now. This is an extraordinary service, an extraordinary record. So I congratulate and thank all the BVRC staff, past and present, and the officers. And I commend the Strategic Services Plan 2022, which will see a strong and progressive continuance of our highly valued and highly recognised BVRC. And I commend the officers' motion to my colleagues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Thompson, it wasn't opposed. You happy not to speak? Councillor Gillies, are you happy if I just put the motion now rather than returning to you? Thank you. So all those in favour of the motion? So I might call out the names: Councillor Gillies, Councillor Watson, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Park, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Stavru, Councillor Franco, and have I missed anyone? Councillor Gold. Yes, I was looking for you there, thank you. And Councillor Addis, although I think I might be showing as Brian Wee because we've swapped computers, but it's me. So thank you, everyone. That's carried unanimously. So we'll now go to item 7.2, which is Circles Lane Strategic Property Project. And I believe that's going to be presented by Scott Walker and then by David Cowan. So I'll hand over to you two. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Happy to set a bit of context for this particular project and this report. The purpose of the report before you this evening is to seek a resolution of the Council to proceed with a strategic property project involving the rezoning and sale of the council-owned land at 399 Burwood Road, Hawthorn, which is also known as the Circles Lane car park. This site presents a really excellent strategic property opportunity for the City of Boroondara. It can generate additional funds to deliver key projects throughout the municipality that will benefit the Boroondara community. To ensure that a positive outcome is achieved, the project will also be guided by three key objectives. Firstly, to enable a high quality integrated development that responds to site features and constraints and is consistent with the Glenferrie Structure Plan and also with the Boroondara planning scheme. It's also to create a positive interface with the adjacent public realm, considering the issues of safety and surveillance. And finally, to achieve an optimal commercial return for the land to enable investment in new projects to the benefit of the Boroondara community. I'll now hand over to David Cowan, who's the Manager of Strategic and Statutory Planning, so that he can talk to some of the specifics of the project and also the project timeline.
Thank you, Scott, and through you, Madam Mayor. The Circles Lane site is approximately 3,400 square metres. It's owned by council and currently occupied by 89 free and unmetered parking spaces. Recent parking surveys show the car parks are predominantly used for longer term parking by Swinburne University students and staff. The current use of the site as a car park is considered an underutilisation of the land as envisaged by the adopted Glenferrie Structure Plan 2011. Parking for Swinburne staff and students is available within the multi-deck car park on Wakefield Street. To proceed with this strategic property project, council needs to carry out a planning scheme amendment to rezone the land from its current public use zone 6, Council will also need to issue a notice of intention to sell and follow due process in taking the property to market. As indicated in the process diagram in attachment 4, the transfer of land can be completed over a period of approximately 18 months, and the future owner can then pursue the redevelopment of the site, which would need to fully accord with Council's planning scheme. So the officer recommendation this evening is that Council resolve to commence with the Serples Lane strategic property project, including the sale of the land at 399 Burwood Road, Hawthorn, and the planning scheme amendment process to rezone the land.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker and Mr. Cowan. So, councillors, does anyone have any questions for officers? Councillor Galt, I think you've got your hand up first.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Look, I'd first like to foreshadow a motion and then secondly move on to a very simple question. It was an excellent report, but one of the things I couldn't find in there is the potential effect on traffic movements in adjoining streets. Presumably those who park there at the moment, predominantly from Swinburne, will either be driven to the train or bicycles or will go around and use the multi-deck car park. Have we looked at the potential for loading on adjoining streets from that? Thank you.
Happy to respond to that through yourself, Madam Mayor, if you wish me to. This particular issue around the impact on traffic in surrounding streets is one that's been discussed with the traffic and transport team. And whilst there hasn't been a detailed analysis undertaken, the indications are that given the small number of cars involved in parking within the car park and the low turnover rate within that car park, the effect of that car parking being moved to other locations or shifting to other locations will be pretty insignificant in the surrounding street network in this particular location, especially given the variety of locations that people come from to arrive at the car park in the first place. So there'll be some positives and some negatives in terms of the circulation and movement around different streets. So the overall effect is anticipated to be pretty insignificant.
Thank you. Councillor Gold, any more questions?
No, that was all. Thanks from me.
Okay, so I did see Councillor Sinfield and Councillor Franco and then Councillor Thompson. So Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The report on page 6, through you and to officers, says that we will be presented with a more detailed analysis of dealing with the parking deficit of 89 spaces in late 2022. I'm wondering why that would come after this decision and not come before this decision to aid our decision making.
Again, through yourself, Madam Mayor, there's been some initial work and analysis undertaken on the car parking, and that has been certainly provided and outlined within this report. So that initial work has been undertaken, but there will be some more analysis undertaken as part of the preliminary investigations and set up for the property. And really this is about understanding the project and the intent of the council to proceed with the project, and that more detailed work will be provided as part of the presentation that goes with the intention to sell the land and why that car parking is unnecessary and not needed. So it's really about the decision here, setting the framework to enable more detailed work on the particular property to be undertaken, and that more supporting analysis that forms part of that. The initial work has already been undertaken. The principles are clear and sound, and it really is about the more detailed work, given that the council has made a decision that it wishes to pursue this project.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Sinfield?
Not really, Mayor. I'd like to know where the 89 people are going to park their cars before we decide on whether we sell it or not. But perhaps I will just leave it at that for now and discuss it further in debate.
Right, thank you. You don't want to pose that as a question. You will leave it. Yep.
I think I'll leave it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. In relation to the rezoning, could you advise the rationale for the, presumably it's commercial one rezoning that we're looking at? And is that because it's adjacent to that zoning? And what's the likelihood or possibility that a future purchaser might try to amend that to residential, say? And what might be the view of the planning staff if that were to occur?
I can respond to that, Councillor Franco. The commercial one zoning was selected as appropriate within the context of the surrounding land and within the context of the Glenferrie structure plan. Within the commercial one zoning, that does allow for residential development to occur as well. So we wouldn't see the need for a residential dedicated zoning there.
Can I have a follow-up?
Councillor Franco, you've got it. Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. In relation to the possibility of its, I presume, so this presuming that Swinburne University could be a potential buyer, they have different zoning on their land. Does commercial one in any way rule them out or cause complications for the university as one of many potential buyers?
I'm happy to answer that through yourself, Madam Mayor. Absolutely not. The commercial one zoning being one of the higher order zonings would enable a whole range and variety of uses within the land, and it would certainly suit the university purposes and have quite a bit of flexibility to enable the university to develop the land if they were to be a purchaser of the site.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Councillor Franco's actually asked quite a few of my questions with regards to the zoning. I might just add one more to it along the same lines with regards to the timing of the zoning. So timing of the sale versus the zoning. If there is interest from Swinburne under its current zoning, would we therefore save opportunity by not going and having it rezoned? So in other words, should we be seeking interested parties before we actually start the statutory process about rezoning?
Mr. Walker?
Yeah, again, I'm happy to talk to that. That's something that we can have a look at as we go along. However, again, my understanding is whilst it's zoned for public use purposes at the moment, it's specifically zoned for public use purposes for local government. So there would be some process needed to reflect the interests of the university if they were to be the purchaser of the land. That could be a truncated process, but there certainly would still need to be some recognition of the change given the ownership change.
So is it more desirable to proceed with the rezoning before we seek interest from parties, or vice versa, from an economic perspective and also a time efficiency perspective?
Yeah. The time efficiency perspective, again, through yourself, Madam Mayor, the time efficiency perspective is to pursue the two processes concurrently, and that is a rezoning of the land concurrently with the investigations, final confirmation of the suitability of the land and the land sale process. So the two should run concurrently. They will run alongside each other and will actually need a final tick off in each before the land can be actually sold. Now, there is some flexibility around the timing on each of those processes, but the most efficient and most effective is to run the two concurrently, and there's nothing to prevent that from occurring.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. No further questions.
Thank you. Now, I can't see any other hands up, so I'll return to Councillor Gold because you foreshadowed you had a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Stavro? Yeah, oh, sorry, are you happy to second? I thought you put your hand up.
I did, but Councillor Thompson, I think, beat me to the punch. So,
okay. Councillor Thompson, are you happy to second?
Happy to, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, for the benefit of Councillor Galton, Councillor Thompson, is anyone opposed? Councillor Sinfield?
Yes, I'm opposed to it.
Okay, thank you. So, we'll return to you, Councillor Galt, to speak to your motion.
Thank you very much. I'd first like to compliment the officers on a very thorough report and well researched and a great initiative, I believe, and point out that this is the commencement of a project and it will come back to council at a few gateways as we go through it. Now, just returning to the project itself, whilst 399 Burwood Road, as we know it, Circles Lane, was acquired many decades ago primarily to provide parking for retail shoppers in the area, it simply does not do this. It is not used for this. It is not well located for it. It is, as has been stated a number of times tonight, predominantly used by Swinburne staff and students for parking. It raises absolutely no revenue, with possible exception of the occasional fine, but it is a piece of land with significant capital of value. Whilst here we are in search of funds for many other projects, such as our placemaking projects. So, given our current challenges financially, I believe it's an excellent one to consider for disposal. I will, for the benefit of speeding it up, mention the Swinburne parking in itself. Swinburne's a great asset to our community, and we should be supporting them in many ways. But I was never a supporter of providing parking in the midst of the shopping area for that function. And it has great benefits of having a railway, one of the few institutions with a railway running right through the centre of it, and many other options. So I think it's a wonderful project, and I really would encourage my colleagues tonight to support the commencement of the Circles Lane Strategic Property Project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Councillor Thompson, you were the seconder. Would you like to speak now?
I might just see if there's any debate, Madam Mayor, and then I'll choose.
So, Councillor Sinfield, you foreshadowed that you were against. Would you like to speak?
Thank you. Yes, I will speak against the disposal of this parcel of land. I disagree with the suggestion just made by Councillor Galt then that this will come back to the council at many gateways along the process. This motion seeks to authorise officers to commence the process for the sale and disposal of this parcel of land. So I don't think that there is any guarantee whatsoever that this will come back to the chamber. It may, of course, if officers reach a juncture that they need direction on, but the second half of this motion seeks to authorise officers to dispose of the land. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, but that's how I read the motion. The disposal of this parcel of land and subsequently 89 spaces available to our community, absent the federally funded car parks that we had hoped for, or many of us had hoped for, I think is just ludicrous. We have no plan or knowledge as to where those 89 vehicles will go. That paper is said on page 6 of the report to come back to us in late 2022. So I can't for the life of me understand why we would make this decision now and commence the process now without that vital information. The loss of parking is significant. Now, the better utilisation of that car park to yield revenue for the council can be easily achieved through rezoning of those car parks, which are predominantly 2P at the moment. And if they became commuter car parks and we charged full tilt for their full day use, it would generate revenue for the council. It's our own fault that it yields no income whatsoever. And I think that that is just short-sighted and silly. This is supported by the utilisation survey that was done that says that most of the car parks are used by Swinburne. Now, we're not here and we're not in the business to provide car parking for Swinburne staff or students. So let's rezone it to make it more attractive to commuters and full day parking needs that are clearly sought by the community in that area. The decision, I think, is back to front. There is no urgency to commence this process now, and I think we'll be better informed by the report that is discussed on page 6 that's supposedly coming back to us at the end of the year. Now, developers are not plentiful at the moment, and I think it's probably a silly time to sell the property if that is ultimately the decision of council. The state of our economy locally and more broadly globally is not one that's suiting developers. There's not spare cash out there for developers to build buildings with the increases in materials. So I think it's really short-sighted and I don't think that it's appropriate or necessary right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Sinfield's really sort of captured my thoughts on this one. I also would have preferred to have the report come back before I make essentially a public declaration via a motion that we're preparing to sell this land. Look, I certainly don't know the minds of fellow councillors, but in this instance, I will oppose the motion simply on the basis of I would prefer to have a report first before I made a commitment to sell a council asset. So I'll leave my thoughts there. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of comments. Firstly, in relation to the timing of the sale, I do think a good point was made there about selecting and considering the best time for the sale. Councillor Galt also mentioned the use of the funds and how we could utilise those funds because we're currently arguably short of funds to achieve some of the objectives we are seeking. But I want to put on the record that while I am broadly supportive of the motion and the direction, and I do consider that it's a very low value use and underutilisation of the land, certainly my support is contingent on any funds coming in being used for capital accumulation in some way and not being squandered on operating revenue in any way, shape or form. And there's no guarantee around that at the moment. That for me is a big issue, but look, I am supportive, and if it does come back, that's certainly a factor for me to ensure that the funds aren't sort of squandered away on operating expenditure. And finally, I wonder whether it's worth considering, given the objection that Councillor Watson has raised, whether we split the motion and consider the rezoning separate to the sale. Perhaps there's merit in doing that in a staged way. I haven't moved the motion, but I'm open to that suggestion as well. Thank you.
So look, I can go back to Councillor Galt and see if he wishes to do that. But short of that, I think we need to leave it as it is.
My preference is to leave it as it stands, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Walker, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, through yourself, Madam Mayor, I just perhaps wanted to make a point of clarification for councillors' benefit, given some of the debate and discussion. Just that the recommendation before you is to commence the rezoning process and also to commence a sale of land process. What is before you is not to sell the land. A decision to sell the land is a later decision, and that will be coming back to council. So the process of rezoning and the process of the sale is what you're actually being asked for here, not a decision to sell the land. That's a later point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. That's very helpful. Now, Councillor Thompson, you would like to speak, and then I'll go back to Councillor Sinfield, who wanted to say something else.
You're allowed to have second bites
Well,
at the apple, Madam Mayor.
Sure.
Um,
If it's very brief.
Yeah, look, and thank you, Mr. Walker, for clarifying that. I was going to raise the fact that, you know, we're starting a statutory process. That doesn't mean that we lock ourselves into a sale. If the figures aren't right, we wouldn't sell it. And there's no time bar with regards to when we actually do sell it. What I will say is this land yields no great benefit to our community, and it's an untapped asset that can actually be unlocked to provide greater resources to provide other things locally, whether it's through the Glenferrie Place Plan or other things across the broadness of our municipality. With regards to, you know, the car parking that's been mentioned, I'm sure you know, the place plan can be reviewed with regards to our cultural precinct, which is literally just across the road at Burwood. We've got aspects in there that look at the redevelopment of that land. And we can make the most of every cent that we earn at whatever point in time in the future that may be, to go back to the community. And I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge. We landlock a piece of land. If we don't actually start this process, we've got a piece of land that's not generating its full potential for our community in a time when we are, you know, we're not flush with money to be able to do lots of things, but we do have the ability to free up some to be able to do some wonderful things. So I think, councillors, we're not selling it tonight, but we're starting a process to be able to work out the highest and best value for this land for the future, a future decision. So I wholly support Councillor Galt's motion. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield, did you have a point of clarification? Or, oh, sorry, look, let's go to that and then Councillor Park. Did you have a point of clarification? Councillor Sinfield, yeah.
Yes, I did. Sorry, I was just waiting for the unmute. Yeah, just a point of clarification, if I could, possibly to Mr. Walker, again, without wanting to draw him into debate. But if the zoning was changed, does that, to commercial one, would that preclude the continued use as a car park in the interim, changing it from public use?
Thanks. Through yourself, Madam Mayor. No, it would not. The use as a car park can continue irrespective of the change in zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Now I had Councillor Park and then Councillor Stavrou with hands up. Councillor Park.
Thank you. I agreed with much of what Councillor Franco said, but I've landed on a slightly different place, I think, in that I don't support the recommendation that's before us. I think it's a case of the cart before the horse. We really do need to understand the parking implications first. And albeit that we're told that what is being sought tonight isn't a decision to sell, it's the necessary precursor to a decision to sell. So in so many ways, it's just a matter of semantics. It seems to me that the poor old residents and traders of Glenferrie Ward would be somewhat alarmed, because we're talking about selling off this parcel of land that's been there for a very, very long time and served the residents and traders in that area for a very long time. We've got Councillor Thompson talking about how we could spend that across the breadth of the municipality, and I'm sure that my residents in Bellevue Ward would love to line up for their cut. But the reality is that council seldom sells assets like this, and that's for very good reason, because once it's sold and the money's applied elsewhere, then it becomes very, very difficult to reacquire land, and it's a rare feat indeed for us to do that. And we know over the course of saving for very many years in terms of the Open Space Fund, just how difficult that is. And the last acquisition that I can recall is the site next to the Hawthorne Arts Centre. Again, it was a expensive and long and tortured process. So I think this is premature. I'd rather see the report on parking first and then consider whether this is a step that we want to take. At this stage, I can't support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Look, I very partial to some of the comments made by Councillor Gold and Councillor Thompson, and also some of the revenue application that Councillor Franco. But the way that I see it is that I think this is a process to begin the sale process, if you will, and I think that it makes sense to start this process, and the reason is that some of the things that Councillor Sinfield said, that developers may not be flush with money, but if we don't have the process underway and be ready and be ready to sell if it's the right time, we won't be able to actually achieve an outcome if that's the right outcome. The key thing is that it is not used optimally, so that's the starting point. Now, perhaps we could have a couple of things into the motion that would clarify things and satisfy everyone. One may be that any sale comes to council with certainty. That would be one thing. And perhaps the other thing that we could add is that, the application of funds, and I understand where Councillor Franco comes from, there may be a need to use the funds in any way going forward. And I think that we shouldn't be presumptuous about that, so long as there's ongoing due diligence by council. But if we can actually add a certainty that the sale would come to council pending a review that includes all the other users, but and also the use that Councillor Sinfield made put forward, that if it were to be used as a full-day commuter car park, would that be actually a better return on capital going forward? If that's the case, then I'm prepared to support it.
So we're just about heading into a debate here. So I'm having a bit of a dilemma with this. I can put it to Councillor Gold whether he wants to add those things in his motion.
I think let's hear it out at this point in time, but I'm not hearing anything that I wouldn't respond to in a moment anyway.
Councillor Thompson, you had a point of clarification?
Yeah, just a point of clarification for Councillor Stavrou. Should this motion fail, he might be inclined to move a motion that reflects more of what he's indicated.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I can't see any other hands up, so I'll return to Councillor Galt as the mover of the motion to close the debate.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'll pick up first the comment about where all of these people from Swinburne would park if we sold this piece of land. It is not fair to say that we haven't looked at that in quite a bit of detail. We spent many, many painful months last year looking at parking related primarily to the Lydiard Street car park, and we developed many models of what might happen under certain circumstances. To return directly to the loss of surplus, I put to you, go and stand in the car park, the multi-deck Swinburne car park, which is almost empty. I would pick up at this point in time, Councillor Stavrou's point. The cost of parking there is $10 a day. And most of the parking that goes around to Surplus Lane, the students don't want it, and understandably. When I was a student, I wouldn't have wanted to spend $10 a day, but it is comparatively cheap parking. It is not a highly profitable venue to compete with that car park, I wouldn't think. Councillor Park mentioned traders and residents benefiting from this car park. Clearly, there's been many studies done on the use of Surplus Lane, and it does not benefit residents and traders. It is primarily students and staff that are of Swinburne that have a need to drive to that site. There was also a mention before, is this the time to sell property? many canny developers buy at times like this, at downturns in the market. And I'm certainly involved with a number of properties at the moment that we're readily selling on for longer term use, not to development at the moment, but to canny investors that want to buy and hold. And certainly, if we're not finding that's affecting this site, this will, from what Mr. Walker said, come back to council for our consideration. And finally, picking up Councillor, the final point, to do with what we might spend the money on. Councillor Franco quite rightfully mentioned he'd want it spent on capital projects. I would think that's rather in our hands when we work through the budget process in great detail as we will, moving into spring this year and autumn. So if I could just wind up on those points, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. So I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Okay, so Councillor Gold, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Franco and Councillor Addis. And if my counting's correct, that motion has succeeded. But those against, let's just ask for those against. Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Park, Councillor Sinfield and Councillor Watson. So yes, that, and Councillor Stavrou. So that motion has succeeded. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now move to 7.3, which is recommendations of Audit and Risk Committee meeting. And I believe that's going to be presented by Chris Hurley, our Integrity Coordinator.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr.
Councillors,
Hurley.
as set out in the report, the most recent meeting of Council's Audit and Risk Committee was held on 1 June. The report lists the matters considered at that meeting and provides you with the committee's recommendation for each matter. The next meeting of the committee will be held 8 September, at which time the committee will receive a presentation from the Victorian Auditor General's Office on the outcomes of their audit of Council's annual financial statements. Officers will be happy to answer any questions, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Questions for officers? I can't see any hands up. Does somebody have a motion they'd like to move?
Happy to move
Councillor
it.
Thompson.
Oh, actually, I think Councillor Stavrou might have
Yes.
set his hand up earlier.
Okay. Councillor Stavrou, you have a motion?
It's yes, certainly. The officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Stavrou. And Councillor Thompson, you're happy to second? Thank you. So for the benefit of the mover and seconder, is anyone opposed to that motion? No. Councillor Stavrou, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, it's I think the paper stands on its own in what it contains. It does outline a lot of the issues that have been discussed in the committee, and I commend the work of the officers and encourage my fellow councillors to support it.
And thank you, Councillor Stavrou. So you're happy for me now to put the motion? Thank you. So those in favour? So that's Councillor Franco, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gold, Councillor Watson, Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Park and Councillor Sinfield and Councillor Addis. And those against should be no one. Thank you. So that motion is carried. Thank you. So our next item, 7.4, is May 2022 monthly financial report. And I believe that's going to be presented by Sapphire Allen, our management accountant. Miss Allen?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. I am pleased to present the May 2022 monthly financial report. Council's favourable operating position against the year-to-date budget of 39.04 million is 20.10 million, or 106% above the October amended budget of 18.94 million. This is due to a number of factors which are detailed in the report you have before you, and the forecast process we have gone through have identified these as primarily permanent variances. As at the end of May, Council's cash position stood at 109.85 million, or 54.01 million above the year-to-date budget. Council's balance sheet and cash position are sound, and overall financial position at 31 May is satisfactory. Happy to take any questions.
Don't see any questions. So I'm in search of a motion, councillors. Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And Councillor Hollingsworth, were you seconding? Thank you very much. So for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to the motion? I can't see any hands up, so I'll return to you, Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I don't think anything really needs to be said. Thank you, officers, for the MFR, and I'm happy for the motion to be put.
Thank you very much. So all those in favour of the motion? Thank you. So that is Councillor Gillies and Cat, by the look of it. Councillor Franco, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gold, Councillor Watson, Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Park, and Councillor Addis. Can I just check if anyone's opposed? So that motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So our next item is general business, and I know we've got Councillor Watson's leave of absence request, but can I just first check if there are any other items of general business? Thank you. No. So, Councillor Watson, we're putting a request for a retrospective leave of absence for Monday, the 11th of July 2022, and I believe you're going to declare conflict of interest.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So we'll just pause while we make sure Councillor Watson is not present. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So, Councillor Park, are you happy to, you putting your hand up to move the motion that it's granted leave for Monday, 11 July 2022?
No, I'm actually seeking advice from governance and or the CEO. My understanding was that retrospective approval couldn't be given. That was always the approach that had been taken. I'm not sure how we can do this. So I'd like some clear advice, particularly in view of the observations by Justice Young and Ryan and Hyler, albeit that that's a New South Wales decision, but the effect, I think, is similar. I mean, I've got no objection, obviously, to the leave of absence, but I just think that it's after the event and it's too late. My understanding is that the approach is that it has to be in advance or at worst on the night of the meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Park. I know we've had some leniency because of COVID, but let me return to Mr. Wee, if he can assist us. Or... Oh, Phil, Mr. Storer is going to. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What I'd like to do here is to actually get some legal advice to deal with the issue being raised by Councillor Park. I don't know that we've had advice. We might have had opinions, but given the matters being raised specifically, I think that it's worth getting some advice so we've got clarity going forward. So perhaps tonight if we leave this. If it's possible to do it retrospectively, then there is a future meeting at which it could also be done for Councillor Watson.
Thank you very much. So we'll put that one on hold and address it at another occasion. So thank you, everyone. So can we call Councillor Watson back in? Thank you, everyone. So Councillor Watson, there's just something we need to check, and then we'll deal with this at another occasion. So look, thank you, everyone. So our next item is urgent business. Can I just check if anyone has any urgent business? No, thank you. So our next item is confidential business, and we do have an item of confidential business, contract number 2021/144 processing services. So, councillors, I'm in search of a colleague moving the following motion, and I'll just read it out. The motion is that in accordance with sections 66(1) and 66(2)(a) of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to members of the public for the consideration of the agenda item titled 10.1, contract number 2021/144 processing services. 2, this item is confidential information for the purpose of section 3(1) of the Local Government Act 2020 because A, it is council business information, being information that would prejudice council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released, section 3(1)(a), and B, it is private commercial information, being information provided by a business, commercial or financial undertaking that relates to trade secrets, or if released, would unreasonably expose the business, commercial or financial undertakings to disadvantage, section 3(1)(g). And these grounds apply because the agenda item concerns commercial negotiations and the premature disclosure of information would be prejudicial to the interests of council. So could I have a mover to move into confidential business? Councillor Hollingsworth, and
Yes.
seconder Councillor Gillies. And can I just check if anyone's opposed? We might just put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor Park, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Watson, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Franco and Councillor Gold and Councillor Addis. So that motion is carried. So I'll now declare the meeting closed to the public. So to members of the community watching tonight's proceedings, the live stream will cease while confidential business is being discussed, and we'll reopen the meeting to the public at the conclusion of the discussion. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So to members of the community watching tonight's proceedings, welcome back, and thank you for your forbearance while we did a little bit of confidential business. Now this brings us to the end of council business for this evening. And before I close the meeting, I want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening and wish you and your family very good health, and please stay safe. And I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much and goodbye for now.